Welcome back to Real Estate Ramblings. I'm Amy Shrader with RE/MAX Real Estate 10.
Michelle Hodges.
Ashley Hunt.
We are missing Christina today. She is a little under the weather. But let's talk a little bit about what do you think are the biggest mistakes you see from sellers when they're listing their house right now?
From sellers when they're listing their house. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes, in my opinion, is that I don't know that they do enough homework on who is listing their house and the work that they're putting into marketing their home. You know, where is it being marketed at? Are they advertising it in the local market? Are they advertising it, somewhere else? I mean, I think that they should probably do a little more homework, I think, on who they're hiring and how that property is getting marketed.
Okay.
I kind of agree with Michelle. I think a lot of it's pricing. A lot of times you'll go in there and they're kind of blindsided when you kind of give them a price because they have not looked at the market to kind of know or had an appraisal or anything like that to give them any kind of value. They've just kind of, it's more sentimental to them, so it's worth a lot more.
Okay. So, how do you feel like the best research is done? If I'm looking to sell my house, I'm wanting to hire an agent, what do you think are the steps that I need to take before I hire an agent?
Well, I think you should get out there and look on, all of the different resources where houses are being marketed, and you need to look at all of the different houses that are out there, who is listing those homes, how much time did they spend, actually developing that listing. Did they have pictures that really sell the home? I mean, to really get in there and pay attention to who's doing what, and how are they taking care of their current clients, and that will give you a good idea of how they're going to take care of you. But I would definitely go back and look at if you're thinking about hiring somebody, go back and look at their listings and compare them against other people's listings. But, just spend a little time in it and look at it, because I do think it's a big deal. I know, was it last week before, I was out and I do a lot of searches on properties, and you can tell when you're in there as immediately when you pull up a listing, the quality of that listing. And this was a Lakeview listing that had like 7 pictures, 0 pictures of the view of the property. I mean, you're talking about an $800,000 home that clearly did not have professional photos or what have you, but somebody should have taken the time to spend to market that property.
I think referrals, paying attention to who people are referring you to, because obviously you've had some people that will refer you, especially in a small community. If you're in like a subdivision like Cherokee, for instance, Amy, you've kind of got your name built up in Cherokee because you know that community. A lot of times if you have a new agent in there trying to learn that community, they don't know the amenities and all that, which helps sell that place. And that's my opinion in it, is just really do your homework on that.
Well, and the one thing I would add is when you're doing your research online, look at, if you find an agent that you're like, oh, well, I kind of like the way they're marketing this property that's near mine or whatever, go to their Zillow profile or Google that person and see what kind of reviews do they have.
Right.
How many reviews do they have? Because honestly, a good agent is going to be trying to get reviews. You know what I'm saying? And if you go to somebody who's been in the business, 10 years, and they've got like 5 reviews, kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have a bad review. Even if you've got 100, you're going to have at least probably 5 that are not going to be favorable, because you can't make everybody happy no matter how hard you try. And I know I take those very seriously. When I get less than a 5-star review, like, it hurts my heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's very personal for me. But, the few that I have are like somebody called into the office and got mad at the way that, they were talked to, or didn't feel like they were prioritized, or whatever the case may be. It was nobody that had actually hired me and used me as their agent. So take it with a grain of salt, roll on, get a new one.
Keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking. But so I agree. I think that, people need to look at who they're hiring, do some research, see what kind of reviews they've got. And when they're doing those online, like, they're going to find out about the pricing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I, whenever I go to list a house and I look through it and then I sit down and I say, okay, so what do you think your house is worth? Nobody ever gives me a number.
No.
Right out of the gate. Nobody will give you a number out of the gate. They're like, well, I don't know. That's why I'm,
Right.
asking you here. You're the professional
But
on
deep
it.
down,
But deep down, they got a number.
They know.
I promise you, they've got a number.
They do.
and they'll tell you that afterwards.
And so you just have to ask the right questions, because I'm like, okay, so you've not been on any websites, you've not looked at anything to kind of think of what your home is worth. And they'll say, well, we've done a little investigating. And I'm like, okay. So if somebody came in here today and offered you cash, what price would you tell them? And I will usually get them at that point to give me a number. And I don't want their number because that's what I'm going to list the home at. I want their number so I know if I'm playing good guy or if I'm playing bad guy.
Right.
Because you're going to have two totally different conversations. Now, it's always great when you ask them and they're like 25 to 50,000 below what the market value is. You know what I'm saying? Then you're the hero.
Right.
When they're 100,000 above, you're kind of like, okay.
We have a lot of homework to do at this point. A lot of work.
And honestly, there are times that I will just say, I'm probably not the agent for you if that's the price you're going to go on at, because I'm wasting my money. You know what I mean? And they don't like to hear that.
Right.
But I've just kind of gotten to the point to where when I'm investing, $500 in photos and virtual tours and videos and things like that, you just don't want to invest that money on a house that is just going to sit there
Absolutely.
and be looking at you later. So you brought up a good point talking about the listing photos. What are your thoughts behind listing photos, like from the buyer's agent perspective? If you go in the MLS and you pull up and let's say they're cell phone photos, or you can tell that they didn't prepare the home for the photos, what are your thoughts behind that?
It's kind of like trying to buy a name brand in a dollar store.
I hadn't heard of that before.
You can't go and expect the best and get the top dollar from somebody if you're using an agent that's not giving you the best. Because if you're getting you can make photos look and make a property look better, and you'll get that too. You'll deal with clients where they'll sit and say, boy, those photos really help this property. And that's true. Sometimes they do. But a lot of times they'll be able to walk through it and see when they're out of state and stuff like that. And when you've got somebody that's just used those little photos from your cell phone, a lot of times you can tell because they're cropped. They're little, small images. But you can usually tell. And I think it hurts to sell a lot.
You know how I feel about it. I don't like it at all. Again, I think you're shortchanging your clients. I don't think it's that expensive. I don't think it's so expensive that you can't take a piece of that commission out to be able to do that home justice with some professional photos. Again, you walk in, if the home has professional photos and it's been set up correctly, you're going to see plenty of counter space. You're going to see all of those things. It's the way it comes across. I think what you really have to do sometimes as a seller is take yourself out of that role for a minute and think of yourself as a buyer. And you think of yourself walking through the home. It's just like anything else. We can sit in an environment so long that we become stale to it. But if you change your perspective on that and you start looking at it from, okay, if I was buying this house and I walked through, what would I want to see out of it? I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember last week I had looked at one when I was checking the hot sheet, and it came on the market in West Hamlin County. And like the guy went and I'm sure signed paperwork, took photos same day, you know what I mean? And there was no preparation made in that house for those photos. So you had dirty dishes in the sink, beds unmade, clothes strewn everywhere in the floor, the bathroom's a hot mess. And the funny thing is, like when I started selling real estate in 2012, that was so common it wasn't even funny. I mean, every house looked like that. Nobody thought about paying attention because, the online marketing of stuff was still fairly new back then. I sound ancient, don't I? But I mean, it was still fairly new. Like Zillow had come out maybe 4 or 5 years before, but nobody really understood how Zillow worked. And, we just weren't the draw for out-of-state clients that we are now. So it was more of a, let's get them in the car, take them to the house, and show them type of scenario. So for me, when I look at that, I'm just like, yeah, we're not 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We need to
Right.
get with the times. But it was an older agent, somebody that's been doing this forever and a day.
Sure.
And, you just want to go, dude,
Clean it up.
clean it up a little bit.
Right.
Just tell them, say, hey, let's do this, and this. I'll be back in 2 days, 3 days, and get the photos. But I know when I'm talking to people about coming out to list their house, and they're like, well, no, we don't want you to come out today because we've got, it's a mess in here. We're trying to do some pre-packing. And I'm like, honey, I'm not going to take pictures when I come out there. I'm just looking at your house.
Right.
I'm like, we'll hire a professional photographer to come out. That's going to be at least a week out. And a lot of people are shocked by that. And I'm just like, yeah, we don't do cell phone photos
Right.
anymore.
Some do, though.
Some do. You're right. But I think it's very obvious. And people say, well, those cell phones do great things. They can take they can if you know how to use them, if you know the settings, but I don't. I ain't got time to learn all that.
Right.
I've not seen one yet that knew how to take them professionally, though. I will say that.
I will say this. How many people do you see that get into real estate and now all of a sudden they do photography on the side? Have y'all noticed that?
I've seen that, yes.
And I'm like, that's two totally different things.
I took photography all through college and absolutely loved it as like a side gig. I never, done it, but I still don't even take my own photos.
But taking pictures of people
Is totally opposite.
is totally different than taking pictures of real estate.
Yeah.
Because with taking family photos or engagement photos or whatever, you have people that you're focusing everything on. In real estate, you're not focusing on a dining room table or, a couch. You're trying to
overall
get the
appearance.
broad view of it. And I don't think the two really go hand in hand. I'm sure you could go back and forth between the two, but just because you're great at taking family photos, I don't know that you need to be in the realm of, trying to do real estate photos.
Plus, you don't have time.
I don't have time, but
Yeah, that's just a lot of time.
I do think it's funny when we're talking about listing photos when you go in and they've got a curio cabinet in the corner of the dining room and they've took a picture of that. Why are you taking pictures of the furniture stuff?
Right.
They've
You know,
zoomed in on it.
They've zoomed in on it, or they've got this dining room table that's elaborately set, with the place settings and all that kind of stuff, and they'll make sure they get a good pic. And I'm like,
Listen, we were looking at, Marty actually and I were over there one day just kind of pulling up pictures and looking at some listings, and there was absolutely nothing in this one picture but a picture of the window and the painting on the wall. Not even from enough for you to be able to see the rest of the room. It was a picture of the wall with the window and like a canvas painting hanging there. I shook my head, and to this day, I'm just like, even if that was a mess up, did you not see that when you picked it up and put it out there for folks to look at? I mean, to me, again, it's the quality. Just trying, how much effort did you put into that?
well, and how many agents do we know? They get those. They may use a professional photographer, They get that Dropbox folder or whatever from them, and the photographer has took the pictures. You know, like he'll take all the exterior photos, and then he might take the drone, and then they go in the house.
And they dump all one room.
And they dump every bit
And they're
of it
all over.
the way that the photographer sent them to them.
Right.
Rather than, okay, let's take 5 minutes and order these photos. You know what I'm saying?
So
Put
that
them
it
in a
makes
specific
sense.
order. Because I'm promising you, I'm not going to look through 20 pictures of the outside of the house before I ever see what the inside looks
No.
like.
No.
And buyers are not going to do that on Zillow or Realtor.com or any of those sites.
No. And to me, if you've got a lakeview house or a lakefront house, that needs to be within your first few photos. I mean, that's the whole purpose in people looking at that specific home is for that. And if you hide it in all of that, it's what are you doing? I mean, put that up there. Obviously, it doesn't need to be the first one, but you know, in the first 3 or 4 photos, that picture should be there because that's what they're looking for. They want to know that. I mean, so I completely agree. And you're trying to click through the photos, but again, looking at all that, even if I just stop to look at the photos to see if I think that this house is something that my client is looking for, I already know before I go through the rest of the listing how well that listing is put in. And I will tell you guys, the listing is only as good as the person that puts it in. At the end of the day, if they don't take the time to put in the information that's needed for folks like us to be able to draw that home in, I mean, that's a problem too. So
Right.
So we're speaking of photos, but sometimes the details is.
that's what I'm talking about. I mean,
you got
when they
the
don't take the
2-sentence
time.
detail that says nothing
But
about it.
you can kind of
And I love it when it says more remarks coming soon.
Yeah,
Well, what's the point of that?
yeah.
You know, they're hoping it sells, I guess, in the first 2 days on the
Yeah.
market, and they don't actually have to write a real write-up or something. But
Been
Yeah.
sitting there for months.
Or more photos coming soon.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and put it out there with 2 photos on there instead of, and we're going to wait on the rest. Well, everybody that's already looked at it, I mean, it's already hit the eye, and that's unfortunate that you just did that because do you know how many people are not going to go back in and look at that?
Well, and y'all are spoiled because you came in under the Amy Shrader coaching of this is how we prepare our listings. But, I mean, you'd be amazed at it. I can remember back in my title company days, and I would go around. I am ancient. I've had so many careers. Some are legal, some, but anyway. I would go around to real estate offices and try to help them with their marketing and stuff, trying to get title business. You know what I'm saying? And so I had an agent that I had walked into his office and was like, "Hey, what you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm putting this new listing on." And I was like, "Oh." And I knew it had been raining for like 7 days. You know what I'm saying? It was like the rainy season. And I was like, "When were you able to get photos with all this rain?" And he was like, "Oh, I haven't been out there yet to get photos, but I need to go ahead and get it on the MLS." And I went, "Why would you do that?" And I'm not even in real estate at this point. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like a marketing person. But I come in, I said, "Why would you do that? Why would you put it on the MLS if you had no photos?"
Right.
Because I said, the most eyes are going to see it when it
When it
gets
goes
entered.
on.
I said, how many people you think are going to take the time a week from now to go back and look at it if you don't, when you upload those pictures?
Or cloudy days.
And I mean, like, you could literally see this light bulb come on, but people just don't think. All they're thinking is, well, I have to have it in the MLS within so many days of, you know, my listing agreement. You can fast forward the date of the listing agreement. Like, you don't have to put it in the date you sign that paperwork.
Right.
And so to me, like, I think being successful in real estate, you have to be able to market. You have to understand, you know, looking at things from other people's perspective, like a buyer's perspective and a seller's perspective, and just, you know, trying to put all that together. But marketing is our main job, in my opinion. We're marketers and then we're negotiators. But people just don't get it.
Right.
It doesn't click for whatever reason. And this was back when, like, if this was a land listing this guy was putting in. If you had a lot or a land listing, you didn't even have to have a photo for it to go live.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't required. So we've come a long way. in our MLSs.
Right.
But so what are y'all seeing as far as buyer activity in the market right now? I think it's slowed down a little bit. That's based on my showings and stuff that are coming through on my listings, but y'all tell me.
I don't know, for whatever reason this past week, I mean, things have kind of clicked for me. I've had several of them, and again, during, the monsoon and all of those things that hit around here, I did have a couple of buyers that were scheduled to come in that kind of pulled out, which I thought was great at that time. They needed to give folks in this area some time for reprieve, but now I've got several just coming back in. So yeah, like today's a super busy day. Tomorrow's a super busy day. So hopefully it'll, I've even got, some folks that lost their home in the flood now that are on their way to buying something new. So, we've got some folks moving forward in life, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay.
I was super slammed last month and kind of getting deals that kind of closed in at the beginning of this month. And now it's slowed down for me. I have got, still some buyers that were still just kind of looking, but not a lot's hitting the market as fast as we would like for it to. So it has slowed down for me quite a bit in the past 2 weeks.
Well, and I mean, the election is a big thing right now. We're 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out from having that election.
Flood.
And then we had that flood too. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be in a holding pattern right now. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter who wins, but people just want to know what they have to look forward to for the next 4 years, whether it's going to be this or whether it's going to be this. But once they have that finality, then they'll make a decision about moving forward or doing whatever. But like right now, everybody's just in this, let's wait. Let's wait and see what's going to happen. So I don't know that there's anything you can ever do to change that. I mean, this will be, I guess, the third or fourth election cycle that I've sat through, and it always does this. People just, they're hanging out, wanting to know what's going to happen, and then, in their eyes, for good or for bad, once they know, then it's like, okay, now we're freed up. We can make this decision, that decision, whatever. So.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. We talked a minute ago about the MLS. And so the MLS stands for Multiple Listing Service. Why do you think having an MLS is a benefit to a seller?
To the seller? Well, obviously that's, when you work inside an MLS, that's it gets that information out there. If it gives them an opportunity to, gives you an opportunity to share that with lots of other folks that are inside that, inside that same MLS, and, to be able to look at whether or not they might have buyers that match that. There's, that's my opinion on it.
I think a lot of it too is they can kind of compare and contrast, be like, okay, my house is not selling, but it looks like the houses around in this area may be selling a little slower, or, maybe checking pricing and kind of seeing, kind of get the mindset, because some of them come in maybe too high or too low, and you can kind of figure out where you're going with that. But yeah, just being able to have the availability to do so.
Okay. So, again, this was way before my time, just so you know. I'm not that old. But before the MLS, real estate offices had black books, notebooks. And they would have, like, Polaroid picture of the outside of the house. And then, like, you'd write up 3 bed, 2 bath, however many square feet, yada, yada, yada. And so, if you work at RE/MAX and RE/MAX has 25 agents, then you knew what your 25 agents had listed when you looked in the book. But let's say you worked at the Realty House, which isn't even around anymore. Well, yeah, the Realty House is, but it was Coldwell Banker at the time. If you worked at Coldwell Banker and you wanted to see what RE/MAX had for sale, you had to drive to the RE/MAX office and say, hey, can I look at your black book? Well, you better hope nobody else was looking at the black book. And then you would go through it. And there was no filter, It was like you're just going to have to sit there and look at every one of them to figure out what was for sale and if you had a buyer. And so if you found something, then you had to coordinate getting the showing. You had to get the key from the agent, go show the house, bring the keys back. I mean, it was a big deal. So the MLS allowed agents to look for their buyers without having to physically drive to everybody's office and say, "Can I see your black book?"
Well, and it also
And trying to make a list, to keep with them.
it creates that that cooperation where, again, we're going to share these with you. So I guess there was probably a good chance back in the day that if Remax didn't want to share their listings with other outside agencies, they didn't necessarily have to. Whereas, being a part of an MLS, again, it's doing the best for your client and getting the most eyes on that property. So,
and that's kind of where buyer agency came from, is once the MLS got formed, and it was like people contacted agents specifically for going out to buy a house. It wasn't, well, I'm listing my house for sale, I'm going to need to buy another house. You know what I'm saying? Like, buyer agency kind of evolved from that. But before, everybody was a sub-agent of the seller. So we've come a long way in the way that all that kind of stuff works. But for a buyer's agent, I think the MLS is your easiest route to access what's available.
oh,
So
absolutely.
expired listings back then was probably a little more difficult to try to reach out to.
Yeah, because you really didn't have a
A list.
correlated list that you could refer back to.
Interesting.
Yeah. And like somebody was having to clean out the book and update the book, and yeah.
Interesting.
Different back in the day. So, but for a seller, a lot of times I've had listings that were like, higher end or unique type listings, and the seller will say, "Well, I really don't want it to be on the MLS. I just really don't want it to be on the MLS." And so I explained to them, what the MLS does for them, and, I'm going to have a special form that you have to sign if you don't want to be on the MLS, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, "Well, I get all that, but we really don't want it advertised." And sometimes it's like a commercial type property where people...
Just had one of those too recently.
Where people just, they're afraid they're going to run off a tenant or somebody like that. And so these people were all over the internet looking, and they had called me because a property similar to theirs had just went under contract, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, when you put it on the MLS, you've got, 500 or 600 other agents who can reach out to their clients who may be interested. But when you're just trying to rely on me, yes, I have a network and I can reach out to those folks, but I don't know everybody,
Right.
unfortunately.
Having 500 networks makes a big difference.
That's going to cover pretty much everybody in this area, you know what I'm saying? So we finally, after like 3 months, they agreed, "Hey, let's go ahead. Let's just pull the trigger. We'll put it on the MLS, da-da-da-da-da." And within like 2 weeks, we got it under contract for them. So to me, that's the power of the MLS, is it's not, it's a way for people to search for properties, but it's a way for a seller to get the most eyes and people working for them to get it sold. While you may not be directly working for the seller, if their priority is to get that property sold, you got to be on the MLS to do that.
Right.
I agree.
All right. Well, that's all for this week. So stay tuned for 2 weeks from now. We will be back with another episode of Real Estate Ramblings.